You are a man. Hold on. A crumpled sheet lies in my trembling fist. I can't release it, not yet. It's half torn, half soaked in spilled coffee, and the words scrawled across it are practically illegible, except for her name. But I know what it says. The memory burns behind my eyes. My breath is ragged, my pulse hammering as if I'd just sprinted a mile. I'm staring at that damned letter, replaying every detail in my head. How it arrived in our mailbox on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday morning. The envelope smelled of cheap perfume, so cheap it made my nose sting. The handwriting was frantic, uncertain, as if written in some cramped restroom stall, pressed up against a flimsy door. I remember thinking, she used to use better perfume. She used to sign love notes to me in graceful loops. Now everything is broken, jagged. Now I see only half-truths and the shape of betrayal. I can't tear my eyes from that name. Daniel. Just 6 letters, but they slice through my rib cage with a dull, persistent pain. The letter claims he knows her better than I do. It hints at how much she drinks, how her laugh sounds when she's genuinely happy, where her secret beauty mark is, the one I kissed for 10 years straight. My stomach twists. You are a man. Hold on, I repeat silently. But it feels like my soul's turned upside down. I remember the morning I read it. I didn't cause a scene. Didn't confront her in a storm of accusations. Instead, I slid the letter into my jacket pocket and walked out the door. At work, I tried to bury myself in spreadsheets and polite office banter. Yet every time I blinked, I saw that anxious scrawl. Daniel knows. Daniel has tasted her secrets. That night, we barely spoke. I told her I was tired. She mumbled something about a meeting running late. We didn't ask each other questions, just let the silence roll over us like a thick, choking fog. She fell asleep on the couch. I stared at the ceiling in our bedroom, hearing the distant tick of our old analog clock. Tick, 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 as though counting off the final moments before everything collapsed. Sometime after that letter, I said to her, "You've changed." And then I fell silent. Not because I lacked the words, but because I had too many. A furious stream of thoughts hammered at my skull, demanding release. The anger, the heartbreak, the desperate desire to compare myself to that man who held her attention. But I forced it all down, swallowed it like bitter medicine. I started to notice the little things. The way she'd avoid my gaze during dinner, how her phone was suddenly face down on the table, how she'd smile at some text I'd never see, then cover it with a hollow cough. She's changed, I told myself every night, lying awake, one arm across my eyes. But maybe I'd changed too. Maybe we both had, quietly, when we weren't paying attention. Eventually, the tension mounted. We found ourselves in the kitchen at midnight, the refrigerator humming like an impatient witness. She stood by the sink with a glass of water she barely sipped. I cornered her, the words burning in my throat. "Where have you been?" I demanded in a hoarse whisper. She stiffened. I was out. With whom? Her eyes flitted downward. Friends from work. How many times? I nearly spat it, my chest heaving. She didn't answer that one, just slammed her half-full glass onto the counter. Water splashed across the marble, and she spun on her heel, retreating into the dark hallway. The hush of the night returned, stifling. And I stood there, feeling like an idiot, like a man who knows the truth but refuses to say it out loud. Days passed like that. I'd throw rhetorical questions. She'd dodge them with half-lies or muttered phrases. My mind roiled with visions of her entwined with him, whispering sweet nonsense in his ear. "You are a man. Hold on," I repeated again and again. Some nights, I scrawled half-angry notes to myself on scraps of paper. Why him? What do I lack? Then tore them up. I was losing it. Then came a moment of clarity. A plan. Not some proud or righteous plan. This was petty, low, twisted with the kind of vengeance that tastes like poison, even as you're craving it. I decided to hurt her the way she'd hurt me. to show her how betrayal looks from the outside. So I bought a ring. For a mistress who didn't exist. I rented a small apartment, half furnished, nothing special. Then I set up a camera. Because I wanted her to see me with another woman, wanted that vision to burn in her mind the way her betrayal burned in mine. I told no one about this, not even my closest friend. I needed an accomplice, but ironically, I chose technology over a living, breathing person. I rigged a mannequin torso with a hidden speaker, an elaborate thing, borderline absurd. But desperation makes men do strange, embarrassing things. I arranged the plastic figure in that apartment, positioned it by the window, tested the camera angles. My heart pounded like a war drum. If someone had confronted me right then, asked me why are you doing this, I wouldn't have had a coherent answer. I just knew I had to show her what it looks like to be replaced. Show her the same sting of jealousy I felt each time I imagined her naked under him. That night, I told her I had a work meeting that would run late. She didn't ask any questions. Of course not. She was used to this new distance between us. I could have been meeting the president for all she cared. My chest tightened with a mix of fury and heartbreak. So I left, drove to that musty apartment building on the other side of town. My footsteps echoed in the deserted hallway. The building smelled of stale cigarettes and old carpet. I unlocked the door, flicked on a single lamp, and stared at that ridiculous setup. The woman wore a cheap dress from some discount store. The fabric draped stiffly over plastic curves. There was a small mic on the chest, connected to a laptop hidden behind the couch. I'd spent hours tinkering with recorded lines, whispers, moans, a few generic responses. I felt like I was losing my mind, orchestrating a scene from a cheap drama. But rage kept me going. You are a man. Hold on. I repeated it, gritting my teeth. I was about to press record when my phone buzzed. A text from her. I'll be home late too. Don't wait up. My thumb hovered over the screen. My breath shook. She was probably with him right now, maybe lying to me in the same passive voice. Out with friends. Sure. Friends. I forced myself to focus. I placed the camera on a tripod near the corner, angled it so it'd catch me leaning close to the plastic figure, stroking its synthetic arm. I tested the mic triggers. Mark, the recorded female voice said. I've missed you so much. It sounded tinny, hollow, not even close to real. But maybe real enough for a brief, shocking image. A swirl of disgust curdled in my stomach. I pressed my hands over my face, fighting the urge to just abandon the whole mess. Why degrade myself this way? Why stoop so low? Because she hurt me. Because if I wasn't going to confront her, I needed to do something to break this slow, suffocating downfall. And part of me wanted to see if I could even stand to look at myself after stooping to such a tactic. I tested the angle again. Record. I started the performance. My voice shook as I said lines into the camera, lines I'd rehearsed in the car. I can't stay long. I muttered to the plastic figure. But this is for you, I said, slipping the ring onto that molded, immovable finger. It slid right off, clattering to the floor. My face twitched in annoyance. I tried again, pressing the ring onto an awkward ridge in the plastic. It stayed. I shuddered. The loneliness in that moment was suffocating, heavy. I wondered if she, with Daniel, ever felt loneliness like this. All the while, I recorded snippets of me lightly caressing its shoulder, brushing the hair from a cheap wig. The microphone played a stuttering moan. My cheeks burned with shame. It was sick. But I kept going, capturing enough footage to string together a passable illusion. Then I left, heartsick and angry, my mind spinning with images of her real intimacy with him. You are a man. Hold on. I planned carefully how she would accidentally see the video. A few days later, I pretended I forgot my laptop open on the coffee table while I stepped into the shower. I left the file labeled something that might intrigue her. Private_memories_4. Yes, it was a trap. But I wanted her to take the bait. I wanted her to feel the sting of betrayal, the shock of seeing me with another. I half expected her to burst into the bathroom, screaming accusations. But no. When I emerged, the house was silent, and the laptop was closed. I had no idea if she watched it or not. My chest felt hollow as I ran a towel through my hair. I found her in the kitchen, sipping tea, her face blank. She looked up at me with eyes that seemed older than her years. I almost questioned her. Did you watch it? Do you see how it feels? But I bit my tongue. We just stood there, each waiting for the other to speak. The air between us was thick, suffocating. My heart pounded so hard I expected her to hear it. She just placed the tea mug on the table and walked upstairs without a word. That night, neither of us slept well. Around 2 a.m., I heard her get up, pace the hallway. I stared at the ceiling, my fists tight around the sheets. I felt no peace, no sense of vengeance satisfied, only a gnawing emptiness. Why doesn't it feel better? Why isn't she furious? The rage I'd carried for weeks didn't vanish. It just sat there, a cold lump in my gut. I'd love to say that was the end of it, but everything only got worse. She came home late the next evening, hair damp from the drizzle outside. Her coat dripped water onto the hardwood floor. She paused in the doorway, raindrops glistening on her shoulders, eyes puffy as if she'd been crying. I mustered the nerve. "Where have you been?" I asked in a near growl. She looked at me. "Does it matter?" I pressed forward. "With whom?" She closed her eyes. "Stop it, Mark." "How many times?" My voice cracked. "You are a man." "Hold on," I repeated in my mind. Her eyelids fluttered. Then, unbelievably, she said, "I'm not doing this again tonight." She slipped off her coat, left it in a wet heap by the door, and strode toward the living room. Something in me snapped. I followed, my shoes squeaking on the damp floor. "Wait." She froze. I clenched my hands at my sides. "I want to know if you saw what was on my laptop." She turned around slowly, a grim smile twisting her lips. "Yes," she said, voice thick. "I saw it." A wave of heat rushed to my face. Her eyes flicked to my left hand, the wedding ring I still wore. "So now we're even?" she asked, as if the words themselves tasted rotten. "Is that it?" I couldn't speak. She took a step closer, raindrops beating in her hair. "Where is she?" she demanded. "This, your new toy. Where did you find her?" I swallowed, trying to maintain composure. "That's not important. Is she real?" She gave a short, humorless laugh. Or was that some bizarre trick? I said nothing, and the silence spoke for me. She blinked, mouth parting as if she wanted to scream, but had no voice left. Something in her gaze told me she'd known from the start it wasn't real. Maybe the movements were too stiff, or the moans too robotic. Maybe I'd forgotten that she works in public relations. She can read sincerity in body language better than anyone. She probably recognized my entire performance as exactly that, a performance. A cunning ploy from a man too afraid to confront her directly. Her shoulders sagged. "You changed too," she whispered, so quietly I could barely hear. Then she headed upstairs, leaving me alone in the dark, the windows rattling from the wind. I stood there for a long time, shame gnawing at me. I had become something else, something ugly. "You are a man. Hold on." The words sounded hollow now. A week passed. She'd vanish in the evenings, always returning late, always reeking of stale perfume that wasn't hers. I convinced myself she was with Daniel every night. My imagination tortured me with images of them locked in an embrace, her breath catching as he murmured her name. The jealousy roared like a beast inside me, so I decided to escalate. I purchased a second ring. Why? Because the first had been a prop, and somehow I thought a second ring would make the charade more legitimate. I booked the same dingy apartment for a few nights, as if I planned to move in with my mistress. I installed a small hidden camera by the door, making sure to tilt it so it would capture her expression if she ever came looking for me. My plan: leave the apartment key where she could find it, along with a slip of paper bearing the address. make it obvious, tempt her to follow me. Because part of me knew she would come. She was grown numb, yes, but jealousy has a way of tearing through numbness like barbed wire. If she thought for a second I was actually with someone else, she'd want to see it for herself. The twisted logic of a wounded heart, my heart, told me that once she saw me in the arms of another, she'd either walk away for good or shatter. Either way, I wouldn't be stuck in this purgatory. Late one afternoon, when she was out, I placed the key on the hallway table, pinned under a note with the apartment address. In parentheses, I wrote, "In case you need me." That was it. Then I pocketed my phone, hopped in my car, and drove to that dismal building again. Inside the apartment, I set up the plastic figure once more, adjusting the wig, hooking up the mic. My stomach flipped with self-loathing. I rehearsed lines under my breath. Then I walked to the dusty bathroom mirror, stared at my reflection. My eyes looked sunken, as if I hadn't slept in days. My face was drawn, cheeks hollow. I looked like a man half dead. I speak as if I'd already died. That was how I felt, a ghost haunting the remnants of my marriage. Night fell. I kept the lights low, a single lamp casting jagged shadows across the peeling wallpaper. The camera's red light glowed from the corner. I moved through the motions, pacing, faking affection with the lifeless figure, letting the recorded female voice spill into the stale air. The entire charade made me feel sick. Time dragged. I didn't know if she'd come. Maybe she was too tired, or too guilty, or too indifferent. Then, a soft knock echoed on the apartment door. My heart lurched. I froze. The plastic figure stared blankly from the couch, wig slipping off its head. The knock came again, louder. I inhaled, steeling myself. "You are a man. Hold on." I walked to the door, turned the knob. There she stood, drenched by the steady rain, hair plastered to her cheeks, mascara smudge. Her eyes flicked past me into the apartment, locking onto the figure perched on the couch. For a split second, I thought she might laugh. What the hell is this? But her face twisted into a look of raw anguish. She didn't step inside. She just stared, water dripping from her coat onto the threshold. I played my part. I reached out and brushed a hand over the plastic figure's shoulder, the camera capturing it all. The mic hissed a line. "I need you," in a metallic, computerized female voice. I saw my wife's hands clench into fists. She gasped for breath, as though the air had been punched from her lungs. "Where have you been?" she whispered. Her voice trembled, almost childlike. I didn't answer, just let the scene hang. "With whom?" she asked again, stepping forward. Her eyes darted to the camera for an instant, maybe registering the weird setup. She looked back at me, tears mingling with rainwater on her cheeks. How many times? My throat tightened painfully. I'd rehearsed some line, something cruel and mocking, but it refused to come out. Instead, I dropped my gaze. I gently guided the plastic figure's hand down, walked closer to my wife, and whispered, "You changed." Her lip trembled. She took in the whole picture. The plastic woman, the ring, the camera lens glinting in the corner. Her eyes filled with disgust, heartbreak, guilt, maybe everything at once. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I reached for her cheek, but she pulled away. I had never felt so despised in my entire life. And yet, unbelievably, that was exactly what I'd orchestrated. My entire plan realized in a single moment. Her jealousy laid bare, the pain of seeing me with someone else. This was what I wanted, wasn't it? But as I looked into her tear-filled eyes, I felt no triumph, only emptiness. I waved a hand at the camera, as if to say, "Look, you see." She did see, and something in her expression shattered. She realized it wasn't real. Real or not, the betrayal stung. She bit her lower lip, as if to hold back a scream. The sense of finality in the air was suffocating. Slowly, she backed away, out into the hallway, rain lashing at her from behind. She didn't speak, but the heartbreak on her face was more than words could convey. Then, finally, she let out a hoarse whisper. "Why, Mark?" My mouth opened. No sound emerged, because the truth was too tangled, too vile. I wanted her to hurt, the way I'd been hurting. I wanted her to know I could walk away just as easily as she could. I wanted to free myself from the constant poison of suspicion. In that instant, all I felt was a swirling confusion, a dull nausea. She closed her eyes, shook her head, and turned to leave. The thunder outside rolled across the sky, and I watched her vanish into the shadows. When I stepped out to follow, she was gone, lost in the sheets of rain. Inside, the plastic figure stared at me with its painted face. The ring I'd slipped onto its finger glimmered under the dim lamp. The camera was still rolling, capturing every second of my humiliation. I walked over and shut it off. The only sound was my own labored breathing. I realized then how foolish I'd been. None of this would bring me peace. The letter, the phantom mistress, the cunning plan, it was all meaningless. She was out there, with him or alone. I didn't know. And I was in here with an inanimate prop and an ocean of regret. You are a man. Hold on. But hold on to what? I remember the day I first suspected something between her and Daniel, even before that letter arrived. We were at a friend's gathering, a casual barbecue. She kept checking her phone, stepping aside to answer suspicious calls. Her face would flush, eyes sparking with an emotion I recognized as longing. I asked her, "Who are you talking to?" She brushed me off with some excuse about a coworker who needed help on a project. The lie weighed on me, but I said nothing, because I was too afraid to see the truth. Now, the truth was all I had, like a shard of glass pressed to my throat. My mind flicked through memories of our early years. The day we moved into our first apartment together. The nights we made love in a tangle of hope and passion. Where had we lost that? Was it a gradual drift or a single mistake that set us on a collision course? The next few days after her visit to the apartment dragged on like a funeral march. I didn't see her at home. She'd leave before I woke, return after I slept. Or maybe I just pretended to sleep, because I couldn't face her. The mail piled up. The once cozy rooms of our house felt lifeless. No trace of her perfume. No sound of her humming absent-mindedly, as she used to do. The letter with cheap perfume was stuffed in a drawer I never opened. My chest felt hollow, as if my heart had retreated behind steel shutters. When she did finally appear, on a Thursday evening, I think, it was as if the storm had followed her indoors. She stood in the living room doorway, drenched from the rain again. She had no key. Had she lost it, or thrown it away in anger? She just knocked until I opened. She looked at me as though gazing through me, her eyes rimmed with red. "Are you done?" she asked, voice steady but drained of warmth. I exhaled, stepping aside to let her in. "I don't know," I said honestly. She glanced around the living room. At the blank TV screen, the half-empty glass of water on the coffee table, the used plates I hadn't bothered to wash. Slowly, she reached up, unbuttoned her coat, and let it slide off her arms. Droplets spattered the floor. She ran a hand through her damp hair and regarded me with a tired expression. "Where have you been?" I asked quietly, echoing my old refrain. She shrugged. "Nowhere that matters." I wanted to fling more questions at her, to demand details, to punish her with cross-examination, but the moment felt too fragile. I just nodded, stepping back. She moved toward the couch, sank onto it like a woman carrying 1,000 pounds of sorrow. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, in a hollow tone, "I saw that apartment. I saw everything." She didn't need to elaborate. We both knew what she meant. I swallowed thickly. It was a mistake. Her lips trembled into a faint, bitter smile. "Which part?" I said nothing. My mind raced with all the things I could say. "I wanted to hurt you. I felt I was dying inside. I wanted you to suffer." None of it sounded like anything more than desperate self-justification. So I stayed silent. She pressed her palms to her eyes, as if to block out the memory. "Is this how you see me?" she whispered. "A liar. A cheater who deserves to be humiliated." I opened my mouth, but the words wouldn't form. I stared at her, noticing how much weight she seemed to have lost, how her once bright eyes were now dull with exhaustion. I realized with a jolt that I didn't even hate her. I hated the situation, but looking at her slumped figure, the anger drained away, leaving only an aching emptiness. I sank into the armchair across from her. I didn't know what else to do. I confessed, my voice cracking. "You were slipping away." I felt like a fool. "And yes, I wanted you to hurt." She let her hands fall to her lap. I saw tears glistening on her cheeks, but she didn't sob or shake. She just stared at me, tears rolling silent. "Then you succeeded," she breathed. "It hurts like hell." My throat tightened, but I forced myself to continue. "Do you love him?" She closed her eyes, a new wave of tears escaping down her face. "I don't know what I feel anymore. He made me feel alive. That's all. For a while. Now I just feel empty." The word empty reverberated between us. I nodded numbly. We sat there, two strangers, exhausted from the war we'd waged against each other's hearts. Finally, she spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "Where do we go from here?" I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, burying my face in my hands. My mind offered no answer, only memories. The letter, the plastic figure, the camera, her face twisted in pain. "You are a man. Hold on." But I felt that the phrase no longer applied. I'd let go of everything that made me a decent man, chasing some misguided revenge. Now the cost was here, staring me in the face. She stood up, walked to the window, gazed out at the rain-soaked street. "I never wanted it to come to this," she murmured. "But it did. And I don't know if we can turn back." I didn't either. I watched her silhouette in the dim light, recalling the first time we kissed, how soft her lips had felt against mine. That memory felt like it belonged to someone else's life. Quietly, I rose from the armchair and stepped behind her. She didn't turn around. I lightly placed a hand on her shoulder, feeling her flinch. The tension in her body radiated into my fingertips. "I'm sorry," I said, though the words felt insufficient, like trying to douse a forest fire with a glass of water. She nodded slowly, but didn't speak. Then she left the window, retrieved her coat, and went upstairs without another word. I spent the next day numb, drifting through work in a daze. All day, I mulled over the question. What now? Our marriage was like a house after a storm. The roof torn off, furniture smashed, windows shattered. Did we rebuild or walk away? I had never imagined I'd be in this position, teetering on the edge of an ending. By evening, I couldn't bear the silence of our house. I paced the hallway, pausing by the door to the bedroom, listening. I heard her rummaging inside, maybe packing. Fear prickled my skin. Part of me wanted to storm in, beg her not to leave. Another part wanted her to go, so I could nurse my wounds alone, free of daily reminders of what we'd lost. The doorknob turned, and she stepped out, a small suitcase in hand. My heart lurched. "You're leaving?" I asked, my voice thin. She shrugged, eyes on the floor. "I need some space." I felt panic surge. "Where will you stay?" She licked her lips, shaky. "I have options. A friend's place." She paused. "He's not there, if that's what you're asking." I swallowed. "How long?" She sighed heavily, closing her eyes. "I don't know, Mark. A week. A month. Forever." Her voice cracked. "Everything's so tangled." 1,000 responses collided in my mind. "Please stay, or let me hold you, or let's talk this out." But all that came out was, "Do whatever you need to do." She nodded, tears brimming again, then walked down the stairs. I followed, helplessly. At the door, she turned, looking at me for what felt like the last time. Something in her eyes told me she half expected me to stop her. But I just stood there, fists tight, nails digging into my palms. "You are a man. Hold on." The voice in my head sounded like a cruel joke. When I finally reached for her, she had already stepped into the rain, the suitcase in tow. I watched her silhouette fade into the night, the rain swallowing her. The door clicked shut. Days turned into weeks. She didn't come back, nor did she call. I tried reaching out, once or twice, short text messages that went unanswered. I told myself it was for the best, that I was free now, no longer weighed down by suspicion or heartbreak. But I felt no freedom in her absence, only an unrelenting emptiness. Not every pain is visible, but it devours you from the inside. I found myself waking up in the middle of the night, sweating, heart pounding as if expecting her shape next to me in bed. I'd fumble for the empty sheets, remembering too late that she wasn't there. I revisited the dingy apartment once, to retrieve my camera and the monstrous plastic figure. The super recognized me, gave me a disapproving glare as if I were some deviant. I bundled the figure in an old blanket, threw it in the trunk of my car, and drove it to a dumpster behind a strip mall. As I tossed it in, I remembered the day I first set it up, how sure I'd been that revenge would taste sweet. Now it felt like spitting out poison. At home, I played back the footage on the camera, a final time. I saw myself, leaning over that plastic abomination, my face twisted with hatred. Then the moment she appeared, wet hair plastered to her forehead, eyes brimming with pain, I saw the heartbreak she couldn't put into words. And I saw me, a man consumed by pettiness, offering no comfort, no apology. I clicked delete on the file. My soul felt heavier for having watched it again. She came back unexpectedly, about a month later. I was in the kitchen, rummaging through the fridge for something to eat. The front door creaked open, and I froze. I stepped into the hall, and there she stood, keys in her hand, staring around like a stranger. Her hair was shorter, framing her face in a new style. She looked thinner, paler, but also somehow calmer. My heart pounded. "Hey," I said, a world of tension compressed into that single syllable. She nodded, eyes flicking to me. "Hey." I glanced at the small duffel bag at her feet. No large suitcase this time. Did that mean she was staying, or just passing through? I swallowed. "Do you want to sit down?" Her chin dipped in a slight nod. We moved to the living room, took our usual seats, me in the armchair, her on the couch. We stared at each other for a moment, uncertain. Where do we even begin? A wave of memories flooded me. The letter, the fight, the silent nights, her tear-streaked face in that apartment. Finally, she spoke, voice quiet but steady. "I've been thinking. About us. About everything." I nodded, heart hammering. "So have I." She twisted her fingers in her lap. "Are we done?" The question hung in the air like a suspended guillotine blade. My gut clenched. "I don't know," I admitted. "I thought I wanted to be done. But now." Her eyes found mine. "Now." I inhaled shakily. "Now I'm just numb. And I miss you. But I also hate what we've become." She bit her lower lip. "Me too." Silence. Rain started drumming on the roof, always the rain, as if nature sympathized with our sorrow. She whispered, "I never set out to hurt you. I should have ended it before it began, but I was confused. I was lonely." Everything felt stagnant, and he was. She broke off, tears glistening in her eyes. He was new. I willed myself not to flinch. The comparison still stung. "I tried to hurt you back," I said quietly, "to make you jealous, to make you feel what I felt." A raw laugh escaped my throat. It was so damn childish. She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "But you did hurt me. I still don't know if I can forgive that." I clenched my jaw, nodding in resignation. "I wouldn't blame you." We sat there, letting the rain fill the empty space. My mind skittered through possibilities. We could get counseling, try to rebuild, Or we could part ways forever. I remembered the sense of finality that had hit me in that apartment, the moment she stood in the doorway, soaked and trembling. I'd felt no victory, only a hollow ache. Perhaps that was the real sign that we were beyond patching things up. Our love had died a slow death by 1,000 cuts, culminating in a staged betrayal that left us both traumatized. "You're right," I said, my voice cold with acceptance. "We might not be able to come back from this." Her shoulders shook. "I know." Another silence. Her gaze flicked to the wedding photo on the mantel, covered in a thin layer of dust. We were smiling in that photo, all bright-eyed and hopeful. I wondered if those people would recognize us now. She took a breath. Maybe it's best if we let each other go. I don't want to keep living like we're both in a constant battle." Part of me wanted to protest, but the words died in my throat. She was right. The day she left with that suitcase, I'd felt a bottomless void. But staying together in a toxic loop of suspicion and vengeance would be far worse. I could almost hear the sound of my own heart splintering again, but somehow it was less painful than the endless tension. Slowly, I nodded. "Okay." Her lips trembled, and she let out a shuddering breath. Then, unexpectedly, she stood up, crossed the small distance between us, and knelt beside my chair. She placed a trembling hand on my knee, and I felt the warmth of her palm through my jeans. Her eyes glistened as she leaned forward, pressing her forehead against my chest. For a moment, we stayed like that, neither speaking, just the sound of the rain and our ragged breathing. Then she stood, gathered her things, and paused at the door. She turned, her face wet with tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for everything." I closed my eyes, nodding slowly. "Me too." She left, quietly shutting the door behind her. I waited for the surge of anger or the black wave of jealousy to return. Instead, I felt a strange calm, as if I'd just walked out of a house fire, singed and battered but alive. My chest hurt, tears pricked my eyes. But I couldn't cry. I just stared at the space she'd vacated, letting the hush envelop me. I had no illusions about an easy future. We'd have to divide assets, handle the paperwork, confront our family's questions. It would be messy, painful. But the war between us was over. No more cameras, no more cunning illusions, no more letters dripping with cheap perfume. I breathed in, coughed out a sigh. "You are a man. Hold on." The phrase echoed once more, but this time it wasn't about clinging to pride or stoking vengeance. It was about surviving. Weeks later, I found myself outside that same dumpster behind the strip mall, slinging heavy trash bags into the maw. Inside them were old reminders, a couple of cheap dresses for the mannequin, the leftover ring boxes I'd never used, a dusty wig. I'd gutted the closets at home, found all the trappings of my twisted plan. As I tossed them away, I felt lighter, though not exactly free. Maybe I'd never be free of the memories, but at least the physical objects were gone. Afterward, I drove to a small park I used to frequent in my youth. There was a pond surrounded by tall grass, the water's surface shimmering under the late afternoon sun. I parked, got out, and walked along the bank. For the first time in a long while, I noticed the simple beauty of ripples on water, the hush of the breeze through the reeds. I inhaled deeply, letting the fresh air cleanse me, or try to. A few children splashed further down the bank. Their laughter rang out, unconcerned with heartbreak and betrayal. I marveled at their innocence. I was like that once. So was she. We both forgot how to be gentle. We got lost in the madness of adult insecurities and illusions. Leaning against an old willow tree, I pulled out a small slip of paper from my pocket, the remains of that letter, the one that started this entire nightmare. Most of the text had faded or torn off, but her name was still legible, the cheap perfume smell lingering. I stared at it, feeling that familiar twist of envy and hatred, but it was muted now, like an ache that's become bearable over time. I folded the note carefully, placed it on the surface of the pond, and watched it float away, soaked by the water. Gradually, the cheap perfume and the hateful words sank into the murky depths. I exhaled, a trembling breath that carried a trace of acceptance. Not every pain is visible, but it eats you from the inside. Maybe by acknowledging it, I could start to heal. As I turned to leave, a final beam of sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the water in a warm glow. For a fleeting moment, I felt something close to relief. Not victory, not joy, just a sense that I could move on. The emptiness in my chest remained, but it felt a little less suffocating. I headed back to my car, stepping with slow determination. My life was in shambles, my marriage destroyed, and I had no illusions about an easy path forward. Yet, for the first time, I felt I could survive the fallout. Maybe that's what it means to be a man in this world. To hold on, not to illusions or revenge, but to the fragile hope that someday the pain will lessen, and you'll learn to breathe again. So I drove away, leaving the pond behind, the ruined letter dissolving in the water. The day was fading into twilight. Tomorrow would be another day, uncertain and daunting. But at least I was no longer lost in the cycle of suspicion and revenge. It was over. The end had come, and in that ending, however bitter, I found a hint of freedom. I felt the faint stirrings of something that might one day become peace. For the moment, I just gripped the steering wheel, staring at the road ahead. My chest felt hollow, my head pounding. But I was alive, and that was enough. I pressed the gas pedal, pulled onto the main road, and let the city lights swallow me whole. It was time to leave the past behind. And so I did.